Welcome to How Preschool Teachers Do It.
This is Allison Kentos. I am an early childhood educator.
And this is Cindy Tarabush. I am an early childhood consultant.
This podcast is for parents and early childhood professionals.
Let our experience and research-based knowledge become your guide. Hey, Allison, I'm so excited about today's topic. We are going to do some myth busting about curriculum.
Ooh, I love myth busting.
I love myth busting because there's so many myths out there about preschool curriculum or even early childhood as a whole. You know, early childhood goes from birth to third grade. And the reason that it goes from birth to third grade and is defined that way is because the children basically take in information in the same way through all those age groups. They learn the same way and the connections are being developed in their brains. That being said, we're going to myth bust because there's a lot of false information out there based on practices that we used to have in regard to teaching children that we now know through studies and research were not really effective ways to teach. And I'm just going to start this topic by saying there's a big difference between learning and memorizing. There's a big difference between learning and gluing. How's that for a start?
That's a good start.
Thanks. I am a huge proponent of project-based learning. You?
I am a very big proponent of it.
So,
in fact, that's kind of like the only way I like to teach.
Yeah, and I do a lot of consulting about methods having to do with inquiry-based learning. That's another phrase for it, right? Inquiry-based learning. Because what it is, project-based learning, inquiry-based learning, there are other names for it, and it's when the investigations and explorations are designed around the curiosity and experiences of children. How's that for a definition?
That's a good definition. That's perfect.
Thanks. And it has to be based on things that they've had some experience with that are part of their real world. And what the adults do is figure out what they already know, what they don't know, what they're curious about, and design hands-on explorations so that children learn to find the answers to their own questions.
Yes, and finding the answers to their own questions is how children learn how to learn.
Yes, they become learners, lifelong learners.
Yeah, so then they know later on how to, when they're adults or even when they're in college, they know how to learn in order to retain the information or learn to, how to study. And then when they're adults, it just keeps going on and on and on. They learn how to retain this information. And because it is based on something that the children are interested in, they are more likely to be more in tune with it.
Right. They are more likely to participate. Yeah. And so what the role of the adult is, whether you're trying to do this at home or you're doing it in a classroom, our role is to observe children, figure out what they know about a topic, what they don't know, and therefore are curious about, and then to help them with designing experiments. I would call it experiments or explorations. Bring in experts to talk to them, show them how to discover the answer to whatever curiosity they have, and that helps them to become critical thinkers. Those critical thinking skills carry them through learning for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
The studies, Allison and I were talking offline a little bit about how the tremendous numbers of studies that are showing that children are better prepared for the years ahead by learning this way than by sitting and memorizing the names of letters out of context or by, reciting memorized things all the time. And really, I want everyone to think back about your education. I know I can speak for myself and my generation when I say the majority of my education was memorization.
I think all of mine was too. And that's probably why I don't remember a lot of it.
Oh, it's so true. I tell this story a lot. When I teach teachers, I tell this story a lot. When I was in high school, I took chemistry for a whole year. I was in this chemistry class. Yeah. And I memorized some things, and I struggled with others, but I gave them back the answers they wanted. I got an A in that class. I couldn't tell you one thing about chemistry today, not one. Maybe I could. Maybe I could tell you O means oxygen. That's about it.
Yeah, but you might have known that before that class.
I might have. You're right. I couldn't tell you. There are so many things that I learned about in school that I couldn't tell you one thing about. You know what? One of my favorite things to do in an early childhood classroom is when I see the that there are teachers overemphasizing things that really should take more of a back seat over this hands-on discovery. Like, for example, days of the week.
Days of the week, the calendar.
Thank you. And calendar. I can't. They don't.
I eliminated
that's not how
my calendar.
Yes, I'm always coaching teachers to eliminate their calendar. It's not how children measure time. And in fact, those one-dimensional calendars that people hang on the wall that were designed and marketed to preschools, they're not even a real calendar. Like, even at least with a real calendar, I can flip pages and say each page is called a month, and it has some sort of visual value. But anyway, calendar is a topic for another day.
Because I could go on about
I could go on and on about like why you shouldn't spend time in your large group doing that. You should be doing other things. You should be teaching social emotional lessons and stuff. But at any rate,
I'm going to write a note about
you making a note about talking about circle time.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
For future.
You want to subscribe to this podcast if you're like, what's up with the circle time topic? Okay, but getting back to
that's what I'm calling it.
Okay. So when teachers are doing that whole days of the week thing, what I like to do, and even with pre-K kids, I'll walk in the room and I'll say to the kids, "What does Monday mean?"
Yeah, they don't know.
And they'll say, "It's a day," and I'll say, "Yeah, what does it mean?" So to an adult, if I said, "What does Monday mean?" they would say that's the beginning of the work week.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I will look at children, young, early learners of all different ages, and I'll say, "What does Monday mean? What does Friday mean?" They cannot tell me. You know why?
It has no context to their life whatsoever.
Correct. They don't get a paycheck. They don't care if it's Friday.
They don't care. Yeah.
They don't have context. What they do have context for are the segments of their day.
Yeah.
And so that memorization was just not a good use of time. When we think about how children learn today in our public school systems in the United States and in many other countries around the world, it is leaning more toward a project-based approach than when I was a student. Do you feel the same way about when you were a student, Allison?
Yeah, because I don't remember doing any long-term investigations.
I remember it in science class.
Oh, science, yeah.
Right.
It was
sort of
I
lived
think,
there.
only for science. It lived in science, and that was it.
There. Yeah, but kids learning math today.
Yeah.
You know, when my kids were learning math, and they're in their 20s, but when my kids were learning math in school, they would bring home this math homework, and I was like, "What are they talking about? I don't understand how they're having you learn this. We memorized it. I don't understand what you're doing." But what they were actually doing was teaching them the reason why the math works. That's what your kids are doing, folks. They're learning why that math works. Just like in early childhood classes, we should be teaching them how the world works and why the world works that way. Because one will lead into the other.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And I think that gluing, like I mentioned before, also gluing is not deeper learning. Making the same identical penguin, not deeper learning, folks.
No, it's not. No. Like, no. But
no, she's just Allison's just gonna sit here going, no.
But no.
Stop that, no.
Because you can't get me going on that topic because it will be here all day.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, though, for many years we put the message out into the world that gluing things to look like something that's recognizable to an adult was learning. And it's not.
Isn't that just so sad? I mean, think about that.
Yeah, it's years wasted, folks. When children are doing an inquiry-based approach to learning, you would not believe the things they say and do.
Oh, God, you would not believe it. Because, oh, God, I have two of my favorite units ever. One, the kids were interested in trees.
Oh, trees is a big one. You know, trees is a part of a published curriculum. I don't want to name things because I don't want to act like we're being sponsored or whatever, but there is a published curriculum where the children study trees.
Okay, we studied trees for 6 months. 6 months because they were that interested in it. Now they started learning like all these I can't remember the terms, but we like knew all the the parts of a tree, even like what was like on the inside
Yeah.
of the tree. What is it, like the phloem?
I
There's
couldn't tell you. No
something
one
on the
did that
inside.
with me. I don't
I
know.
don't remember.
I
But
don't
these
know.
kids would walk around talking about like, oh, and they would go around and be like, that's an elm tree, that's a this tree, and they knew by looking at the leaf, because we went all out. Like I bought them books on like identifying trees. I brought in an arborist to show them like
Mhm.
your interest in trees could lead to a career in trees. And he went around the campus with us and told us like all this stuff. And that, I mean, the things that they were writing and reading, and like they could
And
recognize the words, like these
that's an important point, though,
amazing
the
words.
things they were writing and reading, because one of the
Yeah.
purposes of an inquiry-based learning approach is to teach children how to record data. So I'm not trying to make kids an arborist by
No.
work doing tree. I'm not trying to make kids, a rock expert if we study rocks.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to do is teach children that you can discover the answers to your questions, and you can create something with that data, and you can chart that data. When you chart data with children, if you can do it mathematically through charts and graphs, you can do it by increasing literacy skills, by creating individual and or class books about the topic. This is how you infuse content area, how you infuse literacy in math and science and all these other things. And the children come away with skills like recording data. And the children come away with skills like understanding the connection between the written and the spoken word. And all these things are core curriculum standards. It is a complete and total myth that children are not deeply learning when they have more time to free play and when they have more time to experiment.
Yeah.
And that drives me out of my mind. When people say, but where are the photocopies? And we used to call dittos, where are the workbooks and the photocopies and the endless writing of the letter A, and they haven't memorized the months. Folks, that's a waste of your children's time.
A waste of time.
And I know we did an episode of this podcast where we talk about the difference between a project, craft, and art.
Oh, yeah, we did. But this is even bigger than that, I think.
This is. Inquiry-based learning is even bigger than that.
Yeah.
And it's, I hope that people can understand that just because we were educated a certain way doesn't make it applicable to today's world.
Right.
The world has changed so much in the course of my life. They don't need to memorize so much because it's right on a smartphone, these facts.
Well, yeah. Yeah, now you really don't need to memorize anything because you can just look it up. I mean,
right.
What you need to learn, in my opinion, you need to learn how to learn. You need to learn how to do all those things.
You need to learn what question to ask Google.
Right.
And
how to question things.
And how to analyze things. If I'm looking at something on the internet, is it really a fact? We had an episode of this podcast where we talked about, is your expert an expert?
Right.
And we have to talk about that for adults because we weren't necessarily taught how to vet those things.
No.
We need to teach children how to think about what they're seeing, how to think about what's, in print, how to think about all these things and how to question it. And that's what this generation needs growing up in the technological society in which they're growing up. The world is completely different. But we started out by saying we were busting myths. So Allison, tell me, what myth do you want busted?
I want the myth busted that project-based learning does not prepare your child for
the years ahead.
Yeah,
whatever that may be.
Whatever that may be, whether it be college, high school, kindergarten, whatever.
Right. And you know what? The next episode of this podcast is going to be kindergarten readiness.
Yeah.
So everybody subscribe to the podcast so that you'll know when that comes out if your child is under the age of kindergarten. Because again, there are so many myths about kindergarten readiness. We're going to continue myth busting is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And I hope that people can embrace the myth. One of the myths that I want out there busted, one of the myths that's out there that I want busted, is that memorization and gluing is an indicator of learning.
Yeah.
Just, again, as Allison so succinctly said before, stop that.
Stop it. Yeah.
Just stop.
Stop.
Oh my gosh. So we're going to go ahead and talk about as I said, kindergarten readiness on the next episode. We do hope that you subscribe. And I'm going to mention that you can learn more about this from things I've written, and you can find out about that from my website, helpingkidsachieve.com. And Allison works with young children. She's a mythbuster, so you can also contact her for information. Go ahead and give them your contact information.
AllisonJoy79@gmail.com.
Okay. So don't forget, subscribe, share, and hopefully open up your mind to new methods of teaching young children that actually have been shown through longitudinal studies to be far more effective. You should be going out there and asking for these methods. See you next time on the podcast.